If there's one thing that graphically illustrates America's battle with global warming, surely it's this. Lake Mead in Nevada, the biggest reservoir in the United States, feeding more than 25 million people. But look at that white line round the edge. It hasn't been painted in. It's where the water used to be, now dried up by drought and climate change.
Now, the climate deniers would have you believe that the devastating heat here out west is the result of natural fluctuations, but that white line behind me does not lie. Lake Mead has dropped nearly 150 feet since the year 2000, and for the first time ever, they've had to declare an official water shortage, as the combination of searing heat and drought has taken its toll.
But what happens in Lake Mead doesn't stay in Lake Mead. Just down the road, in the fastest warming city in the country, Las Vegas relies on water to power its round-the-clock consumer culture. But climate certainly isn't top in the minds of the millions who flock here every year.
Are you worried about global warming?
No. I don't think climate change affects anything. It's how Mother Nature just brings climate to us.
The hurricanes are much worse. There's got to be some reason.
Do you believe in climate change?
No.
Why not?
Bullshit.
What do you mean, Elvis?
Climate goes up and down for centuries and millennium. There's no such thing as climate change.
America is at a critical juncture. The majority, like President Biden, believe not to act on climate is gambling with our future. But some seem happy to spin the wheel and push a very different agenda.
The whole notion that we are facing a climate crisis is a delusion.
The voice of the Heartland Institute, a group of climate change deniers hosting a conference here in Sin City.
A complete and accurate representation.
In an era of pandemic and lockdowns where misinformation has sown division, the language of COVID-19 is increasingly being used to spread fear around climate change.
They know they have problems.
In one session, we witnessed attendees trying to discredit the work of the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC.
They know they're lying.
They're assuming what they're supposed to be proving.
Where were the climate attribution studies for the 17-year hurricane drought?
Last question.
And when you're talking about IPCC reports, you know, they're not signed off by a couple of people. It's hundreds of scientists in the world, and the wording for those reports is agreed by almost every country in the world. Granted, you don't all agree with that, but if you don't, how do you account for the increasing severity of forest fires, of droughts, of floods that we're seeing in the world? You're all having a good laugh, but how do you account for these things?
You need to be very precise in what you are alleging.
That's what we've seen this year, but they're not keen on an alternative view, as I quickly discovered.
You can't measure what's happening in global warming and what happened this year.
That's totally fake science.
What's wrong with more warming?
So, Jenny, who are these guys then, the Heartland Institute, and are they having any significant impact?
What's happened with the pandemic is that there is a very real personal experience that has been shared by millions of people globally that can now be weaponized and capitalized upon to really engender a huge amount of outrage and grievance and fear. And what institutions like the Heartland Institute have been doing for years is to provide that sense of academic rigor, who can then go on to mainstream outlets like Fox News and reach an audience with, exponentially more reach than they ever would have been able to achieve with their own social media footprints.
Where they want to put the elites in charge.
Personified by this man, Mark Morano, a self-styled environmental journalist and regular conservative media pundit who was busy scaremongering when we caught up with him.
Attention, but I don't hear anybody saying
then you're not
categorically that we need climate lockdowns. And that is something that you are saying categorically, but no one has
climate
said that.
lockdowns came from a warning from the Gates funded.
You have co-opted it.
I have not co-opted it. I've heard them talk about Build Back Better. I've heard them say the phrase Great
But
Reset.
Build Back Better
Hold on.
is about funding.
Do you deny what the World Economic Forum had said in June of 2020? This is a great opportunity to reset capitalism. COVID is an opportunity for us.
The reason that they're saying to reset capitalism is because of what
they
they
do that all along. But they're using COVID as an example to say, let's now use climate to do the same things that we did with COVID.
The climate crisis.
Jenny King's organisation, the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, has studied the rise of climate disinformation and in a report shared with Channel 4 News reveals the efforts made to push one phrase in particular, climate lockdown, into mainstream discourse.
So we've been hearing here about COVID lockdowns, soon to become climate lockdowns. What does that mean?
Climate lockdown is a new conspiracy that we're seeing in the anti-climate space that explicitly uses the language of the pandemic and of COVID-19 to fearmonger about a potential future of green tyranny, where governments are stripping people of their individual freedoms under the excuse of combating climate change.
And so the misinformation flows. But the effects of a warming planet are clear and intensifying, even as many seek to muddy the waters. But with the UN climate conference just around the corner, the need to separate fact from fiction, reality from falsehood, has never been more pressing.